What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to remove emblems, stamps, laser engravings from your AR lower. There are multiple reasons why somebody would want to do this. For me, I like the clean look on my lowers. I don't like all the extra stamps, logos, all that extra stuff. I usually just leave the serial number on there and everything else goes. That's just me though. Whatever reason you have is good enough. You don't need to explain yourself, but today I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Now, what you will need, and by the way, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but personally, I like leaving the serial number on here just to say within the legal side, the alphabet boys, they be wildin', so I try to, be a law-abiding citizen. So I usually leave the serial number on there and everything else goes. You can do whatever you want, but yeah. What you'll need to get this done, again, the process is super easy, 4 easy steps, but this is pretty much what you'll need. Something to clean your lower. I have alcohol here. You can use brake cleaner if it's already been shot or if it's really dirty. But usually I find that if it's a strip lower, alcohol is perfectly fine. You're going to need JB Weld, the original formula, not the quick stuff, the original formula. You're going to need a pair of gloves because you don't want to get oils and all that back on the lower once you've cleaned it. And some tape so you can mask off some areas. This is something that I use along with the string or something that you're going to need to hang this up while you spray. This is fishing wire or fishing string, and then this is just some hook of something. I don't even remember where I got this from, but I'll show you guys how I use this. And then sandpaper. I'm using 220 and 320. So we got 2 pieces of sandpaper. This is 2 pieces of cardboard that I'm going to use to apply the JB Weld, and I'll show you guys how to do that. This is a hair dryer and microfiber cloth, and that's it. That's all you need. And then obviously whatever spray color that you're going to use to recolor your lower after you've done everything, or you can stop at step 3 and then send it off to get Cerakoted. It's really up to you. So without further ado, let's get going. All right, step 1 is to prep. To prep, we're going to make sure that it's clean. Usually I get strip lowers. There's not much prepping involved. Alcohol, microfiber towel. You wipe the whole thing down. Make sure there's no grease, fingerprints, or anything like that. You should be good to go. I'm not really worried about the inside, just the outside, so that the paint stays on really well. Again, we're using alcohol, microfiber towel, and then we're using some tape. The only part that I usually like to tape up is the insides, depending on the type of lower, but this one I'm not really too concerned with it at all. I'm not taping anything, so no tape today. So but some lowers, the way that the guts are, you sometimes want to lay a strip in there so that it doesn't get in there, but for this one, perfectly fine the way it is. So no tape, and we're gonna some alcohol. I mean, this one's pretty clean, it's just a little dusty, so just make sure that no dust, no fingerprints or anything like that, and then you should be good to go. If you've already shot your lower and you're just taping the trigger and you're taping things and you're not stripping it, just tape it up like I said, and make sure that you tape it up as good as you can. Some people use brake cleaner to make sure that it's really clean. Alcohol still works, or whatever, however you want to clean it, but I can recommend cleaning it as best of your ability. And that's step 1. All right, part 2, we're going to actually apply the JB Weld and the steps that I take to make sure that the process is the best process that you could possibly take. Number 1 is, again, make sure that where you're applying it is clean. There's no dust or anything like that. I like to use something like this, where I kind of just brush around the areas that I know are going to get that JB Weld and those cracks. And I brush that out really nice. All right, once that's done, what I like to do is I like to take the hair dryer, put it on high, and then warm the areas that you're applying the JB Weld. So I'm doing here, getting rid of the spider here, and I'm doing up here, getting rid of the dress here. So I'm applying the hair dryer in both those areas, and I'm trying to warm it up and get it as hot as I possibly can with the hair dryer. Now you don't want it to be piping hot, but you want to warm it up, and what that's going to do is when you actually apply the JB Weld on there, it's going to melt the compound that you're putting on there, and it's going to melt into the little cracks and crannies, and it's going to be like an even fill when it actually hardens up. So, and it lays on better that way. So I've done it with or without, and I always prefer adding the heat than the JB Weld so that the process is a lot smoother and you get a lot better results that way. So I'm not going to do it on camera. I'm going to warm both spots up, and then we're going to come back. Now before I go, we're going to talk about the compound itself. I'm using a piece of cardboard box, and you're going to want to apply just a line here. We're doing that little line of this one, and then we're going to do basically the same line next to it, so you pretty much get an even amount of both. And then again, another piece of little cardboard box. You're going to mix these two until you get a gray consistency. You're going to mix this up. You're going to get this gray mixture, gray consistency. And then there you have it. It's going to have a little smell to it, but good to go. Gray little consistency. Now, you don't have to work at the speed of light to apply this stuff. You have some time before it hardens. So this is ready to go. Now, again, we're going to go here, apply the heat on both areas that we are getting rid of. So whatever areas you're going to get rid of the engraving or the stamp, you apply the heat there, and then we apply the JB Weld. So I'm going to do that now off camera, so I'm not destroying y'all ears with my blower, and then we'll come back. All right, so I just used the hair dryer, warmed up both areas, and people are going to ask, how long do I do it for? About 2-3 minutes of just getting pretty close. Your hands will get hot, so I like to put it down, get super close, and do that for about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and your lower will be hot to the touch, and that's what you want. Once that's done, then we can start grabbing the JB Weld. You want to start applying. Now, the key with this is that you want to apply enough to fill the little crevices, but you don't want to apply too much where you have to come back and sand a whole bunch. If you have to come back and sand a whole bunch, you messed up. So we're going to apply here. I want to keep the serial number, so we're going to do that. Come back and get some more here. I like to blot it in there so that I ensure that it's getting into the little cracks and crevices. And you can manipulate the mixture. So like now it's pretty much covered. There's a little too much on there, but that's fine. I like to leave it like that, and we'll clean that up once we're done. And we're gonna come on this side, do the same thing here. We're gonna grab some more. Again, you want to plop it on there, and if you need something smaller, more precise, that's why I suggested a smaller piece of cardboard. That way we can round those edges and make sure that it all gets filled in. So that's filled in right there, and then I want to take that bottom part here as well. So it's a little tricky down here, but we'll figure it out. So again, I'm gonna blot it in there so it completely fills the nicks and crannies. So you're filling. If you need to turn it around, do so. All right, so pretty much everything is covered. See how that's running up there? And that's, you don't want to leave it like that. So I like to clean it up by just scraping. And then removing the excess. Like that. See how that looks? You want to make sure that when you're scraping, it's flat. And it's flat because you filled it in. Now the top part, you can always clean that up like that. See how that's, I don't know if the camera shows it, but it's flat now. You can see the lettering, but when we spray over that, when we paint it, you're not gonna see any of those letters. Same thing up here. I wanna clean this up. It's too much, it's too blobby. And if you're scared that you're not gonna be able to get it flat enough where in the end you're still gonna see the letters, leave it a little, not too thick, but leave a little bit on there. We'll be able to sand that off. You just don't want to have too much on there so that you spend 2 hours sanding. So I'm gonna remove a little bit on that. So like I can see that there's a little divot there. So you want to make sure that everything gets filled. So just to be safe, I want to add a little bit more. Same thing up here. I'm going to add a little bit more. Just not sure of the depth of those little engravings. So see that right there? And then the bottom part, I think I'm cool with the way it looks. It's a little too much. We'll have to do some sanding, but that's okay. Still not too much. And we can leave it just like that. So even if you get serial number like right there, I can grab a little Q-tip or something and clean that up before it dries. And then that's it. We're gonna let this dry. And usually I hit it with a hair dryer one more time, not on high but on low or medium or something like that, just to speed up the drying process for another minute or 2 or 3 minutes. Hit it with the dryer, and then I leave it to dry. Give it at least an hour, hour and a half. You'll know it's dry because it turns colors, and then it's all chalky when it's done, and you'll know it's dry. And then once it's dry, we'll be able to go and do part 3, and we're almost done. So I'm gonna actually clean that up here so that I want the serial number to be clear, not impending or anything like that. So we'll clean that up, and then we'll do part 3. As I go over it with the hair dryer, I like the, so by the way, you hit it with the warm for 2-3 minutes after applying, and then I like to go with the cool for the rest of the time for another 5 minutes just to speed up the drying process, and then let it air dry. So with the cool, you hit it with the cool for 5 minutes, and then you let it air dry for an hour, hour and a half. Now a tip that I have for you guys is, as it hardens, it's like cement. You can kind of massage it, and it's better than when it's freshly applied because it's a little bit runnier when you're freshly applying it. So if you need to make any adjustments or move anything, wait 20-30 minutes into the drying process. You'll be able to move it around a little bit better because it'll be thicker essentially. But be careful. You don't want to move too many things around. You want to have it smooth. You don't want too much on there. See how it's laid out there, not too thick or anything like that, because it makes the sanding process and the next step a lot easier. So I'm gonna hit it with the cool for another 2-3 minutes, then I'll let it air dry for an hour and a half, then we'll come back and do we'll do part 3, finish part 3, and then we're getting to part 4, which is just the painting process. So we're almost done. So this is what it looks like after about an hour and a half, 2 hours drying in room temperature. I did use the blow dryer for a little bit on cool to speed up the initial drying process. I don't like laying it to dry while it's still all really wet. But other than that, it's been drying at room temperature. I'll probably put a fan on it to speed it up a little bit more. I usually like to do this during the day so that I can throw it in the attic, and usually it's about 101, between 101 and like 110 up there during the day. And it really speeds up the drying process. But did this in the afternoon, sun was already setting, so I'm just letting it dry out room temperature. My advice is let it dry as long as it takes. If it takes 4 hours, that's fine. If it takes 6 hours, let it dry, because when you get the sanding and all that, you want it to be dry so that you don't have to come back and have smudges or anything like that. Do it right the first time. So right now it's still wet, not ready yet. So this is what it looks like at around an hour and a half, 2 hours. So if yours looks like this, let it dry some more. So we're gonna wait, and I'll be back when it's completely dry. So we're back. It's finally dry. I know earlier I mentioned that once it gets dry, it gets chalky. I misspoke when I said this a little bit earlier in the video. It's not gonna look chalky, but once you start sanding it, it's gonna be chalky. It's not gonna be pasty or anything like that. You should be fine. This is pretty much dry. It'll be a little sticky. Sticky is not even the right word, but it's not tacky or anything like that. But when you put your finger on there, it's not sticky, but I don't know. You'll see once you do this. And make sure you're wearing gloves. You don't want any oils or fingerprints on this so that you have to re-clean it and all that. Put gloves on. And yeah, so this is dry. I left it overnight, and yeah, woke up to it dry. Also earlier I mentioned it would dry in a few hours. Sometimes that happens when I bake it with my attic, but if I don't do that, or don't use an oven or anything like that, it'll probably take 4+ hours. If you can wait overnight and do it, that's even better. Just let it dry, let it do its thing. But it's dry now, and we're ready to sand. Now as far as like sanding goes, again, I mentioned 320 and a piece of 220. Now, if you have more stuff, more compound to sand off, obviously people are gonna say use a different type of sandpaper, 1000 grit, whatever. But when I do this, I try to put the least amount on there. So, I mean, it's on there, but it's flat enough where these two will work. So usually I'll cut off a piece like this, and then I get busy and I start, and this is what I mean. See how that's chalky? So this is dry, it's chalky. So what you're gonna want to do is just start sanding. That's what I do. I just start sanding. Do not try to rush the sanding process either. Just sand. And the goal is, so I start with the 220 and then I finish with the 320. So the goal is to flatten everything. I want both areas that I applied this JB Weld at to be completely flat. So get the sanding. So I'm gonna sand this. Probably take me 20-30 minutes to sand, and then we're gonna come back because I don't want to bore you with this. And I'm gonna show you what it looks like after the first pass of sanding, and then we'll go from there. It's been like 5 minutes of sanding, and see these little ridges, all that stuff. It's not flat. You can feel it under your fingers. Not good enough. So we're going to keep sanding until all these little ridges and all this stuff is gone. We want it completely flat, and I'm still using the 220. So we're going to go back, keep going, and then I'll come back when this is all flat. All right, so it's been like 15 minutes of sanding. Also, don't mind my thumb, I was sanding hard. But this is what you want it to look like. You want to get rid of the excess, and you want what you covered to come back, because now this is flat. This is completely flat. There are no rivets, no dips, nothing. This is completely flat to the touch. So when this is painted over, it's like this never existed. So this is completely flat. So you want to go from this, all these little ridges and all that, to this. So, and the reason I like to use a 220 and not anything grittier or anything like that is because I have more control over how much material I take off. The 220 does a good job of taking off the compound and not taking too much off of the coating that was already there in the lower. So I'm not worried about two different textures, two different layers, or anything like that. It literally works hard at taking out that compound, and then it just leaves it like this. So this is what you want it to look like. So if you're sanding, and it doesn't look like this, you're not done sanding yet. You don't want it to have a thin layer of the compound on there and you can't see the letters, because when you repaint, you're gonna have to do more coats to cover up that layer. You want it to be like this. Again, this is super flat. And if it's not flat enough for you, if you run your fingers at it and you feel any divots or anything like that, keep sanding. And if you have to reapply JB Weld, let it re-dry and resand, that's fine. Making mistakes with this is fine. Nothing is permanent. Let's say I do this, sand, paint, do everything, and then I still don't like the finish of the paint, I can resand, repaint. So even if you make a mistake, do not worry about it. You can fix it. If you make a mistake here or anything like that, or you didn't put enough to fill in the letters, that's fine. Sand, reapply JB Weld, let it dry, resand again. So the process of using the hair dryer or a heater or heat gun, if you have one, is important, because while the lower is heated up, it actually melts, I believe it melts the compound when you add it, so that it just fills the cracks perfectly. So I've only used a 220 so far. I like where this is looking at, and what I'm going to do is now we're going to grab the 320, and then I like to just clean it up a little bit with the 320. Smooth everything out. Make sure that it's super smooth, and just clean it up, and it'll smooth out. Like, that's smooth. That's perfect. And then we're gonna do the same thing here and here. And when I'm done, I'll come back and you guys can see the final product before we get the painting. So just wanted to come back real quick and show you guys. So I started down here. See how the letters are starting to pop out again. And again, you're just gonna sand and sand and sand. It's gonna be dusty. You're gonna get a lot of stuff off, but the goal is to, see, that's smooth right there. Bring out the letters again, so it's filled in like this. So we're almost there here. Well, not really, but it's gonna take us another 15-20 minutes to do this side. And again, it's gonna be dusty. You're gonna get a lot of stuff off. Just blow on it. Use a microfiber towel and just keep going. And then you want to remove all this excess stuff. All this excess stuff, you want to take that out. All right, so I'll get that and I'll be back. All right, so we're back, and this is what it looks like after sanding. So we're pretty much ready to clean this up. How I clean this up, usually with some water. If you're wearing gloves, water or alcohol is pretty much all you need, because all you're trying to do is get the dust off. So use the hair dryer or a blower or something, and then water or alcohol to get all the dust off, at least on the outside. Internal doesn't matter, but I still try to wipe it down and get it all clean. But you get it all clean and then you're ready for painting. Now, before we go on to step 4, see right there, that little divot right there. So while I was sanding, I don't know if I nicked it or something, but that may happen sometimes. You can, it's two things you can do. One, you can put a little bit of JB Weld on there and anywhere else that you think may need it and let it dry and resand really quick. Or you can gamble and bet that it's filled a little bit and that the paint will fill in the rest of that little divot area and then everything else will be flat. So just because I'm doing this video with you guys, I don't want to make it a super long video. I'm going to bet that the paint will cover that up once it's painted over. If it doesn't, and when we're looking at this, I can still sort of tell that the little divot is there, what I'll do is I'll sand it a little bit, only the part that I need, sand it down a little bit, add the JB Weld, let it dry, sand again, repaint, and then we're good to go. So again, don't be afraid to make a mistake. This stuff is easy, it's just tedious. So take your time, do it right the first time so you have to come back and fix it. But for me, I feel like that should be good. And even if it isn't, I'll still be good. So this is what it looks like. Everything is smooth, filled in, and then we're ready for paint. I like to have it like this because if you have a film or layer on there, a thin layer, because you think that you want the layer on there, you're gonna have to put more paint on here to get rid of that thin layer because it doesn't cover well under paint. At least that's what I've noticed. So I like it like this. Sand everything down and just make sure everything is filled in. So step 3 is done. Now we're moving on to step 4 and we're painting. All right, for the painting, all we're gonna need is some tape if you plan on taping out the insides or this part of the mag wall here. If you get paint in here, it's no big deal. It'll scratch off, it'll wear off, you'll be fine. But if you're worried about that, I would grab some strips of tape and then lay it down on the insides. And then once you're done, you just rip that off and then you're good to go. But you need your tape, something to hang with, because I don't like painting on flat surfaces and then letting this dry and then turning it around to paint that. Nah, we're not doing that. It's double the work. I don't like wasting all that time. We're gonna hang this up. To hang it up, I'm using a fishing wire. Super easy. And we just run it through here. And then you do whatever loop you want. So I'm gonna tie this up really quick, do a little get a loop. Another one. Wrap it up. All right, so that's tight. And then this I use to hang, and then I hang it like this. This is how it hangs. So I hang it on anything. So when I'm painting and I want to bake it in the attic, I hang it in the attic from the stud or something. And this makes it really easy to hang. If you don't have this hook thing, you just need the wire. Find a clothes wire or something and then hang it up. You want to hang this when you're painting, and you want to have 360 access to it when you're spray painting as well, so you can spray paint 360. So we're ready for paint. This is how we're going to hang it. Let's paint. If you're sending your lower to go off to get Cerakoted, you stop right there. The prep is done. Send it off to get Cerakoted. If you're going to paint it yourself, you're going to Radical it yourself, this is for you. Now, for me, best practice is to get some water, start boiling it. Use a tea kettle, whatever, boil some water. Put it in a pan, put it in something, and then put this thing in that warm water. It will produce a lot better results when you warm up the actual paint. It doesn't need to be boiling, it just needs to be hot enough where when you put this in there, it gets this hot too. So do that, let that sit in that hot water for 10 minutes, and then once that's done, shake it up, and then we're ready to get painted. So I'll do that now, and then I'll come back and start painting. All right, so we're ready to paint. I have the lower hung up. I already gave it a one last pass with the microfiber towel. Make sure that it was clean, no dust, no anything on there. Also, spray can has been sitting in the water for about 5 minutes now. I like to do half boiling water, half tap water, and it gives you a nice mixture of a nice warm hot water that it lets the paint warm up so you don't get any blops or clogs or anything like that. It's a smooth stream, smooth spray. So that's been sitting for 5 minutes and we're ready to start painting. Now, the painting process is actual 4-step process in itself. And this is very, very important. So when you're painting, pay attention. Step number 1 is a very light, very, 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 very light coat that you put on your lower. So our first coat is gonna be very light, and then we're gonna wait 5 minutes. Come back, we're gonna do a second coat. It's gonna be medium, it's gonna be a medium coat. So light coat first, medium coat second. All the coats are gonna be medium coat after the light coat, if that makes sense. First coat, light, 5 minutes. Second coat, medium, 15 minutes. Third coat, come back, another medium coat. Now you wait 30 minutes for it to dry. And then the last coat, you could do a medium to moderate heavy coat. And then that one, we're waiting overnight for it to dry, and then we'll come back to it. So step 1, light coat, you wait 5 minutes for it to dry, come back. Second coat, medium coat, you wait 15 minutes, then come back. Third coat, medium coat, you wait 30 minutes, then you come back. And then the last coat, the fourth coat, you do a medium to heavy coat, look at your lower, make sure everywhere is coated, spray where you need to. And then that one, we're waiting 24 hours overnight for it to dry, and then we're done. So that's the process. So with this, we're gonna start with the light coat first. Now what I like to do is, I like to have something like this, or a cardboard piece or whatever, because the overspray can get everywhere. So I put this behind and then spray. And then I also like to use this as a, just to test that the spray is good. So I'll spray it here when I think it's globbing or anything like that. But overall, I just use this to put it in the background so the overspray doesn't go everywhere. So we're gonna do our light coat first, and then we'll get going. And let me go turn around now. There we go. Extremely light coat, like barely on there. Now we're gonna wait 5 minutes, then we'll come back and do the second coat. All right, y'all, 5 minutes is up. We're about to do second coat. Test that, make sure it's good, it's good. Now we're gonna do another coat. This one's gonna be a medium coat. Notice how the engraving and all that, it's starting to go away. The only thing that's still staying is the fact that the jibby weld is white colored, and so that's why we have the 4 coats, so that goes away. Let me go do the other side, and then we'll let it dry for 15 minutes. That should be good for our second coat. I'll hit it one more time. Some spots I missed. There we go. Now we're gonna let this sit for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back for the third coat. All right, so it's been 15 minutes. We're about to apply the third coat. Quick tip, before I do the third coat, when you're spraying, make sure that you're not too far. If you're too far, like let's say I spray right here. Let's say I'm far out, or you can't even see how far out, you're gonna get blobs on here, and it's gonna dry. So you're gonna get little dots that dry before they get on there. It's not gonna be flat the way it looks now. You wanna get close enough where it's flat, but not too close where it kind of cakes up. So this is how close I like to get. And I never stay in one spot too long. So this is the third coat. Give it a little bit extra. And let's do the other side. Let's flip it. I know it's just crazy while it turns, but I've done this a lot, so. Make sure I get the other side. And then over here, I'm gonna give it some extra love there. There we go. And we're gonna let that dry for 30 minutes before we come back. Missed that spot there. So we're gonna let that dry for 30 minutes and then we'll be back for our fourth and final coat. All right, y'all, it's been 30 minutes. Now we're about to do the fourth coat. Now I usually say it's the fourth and final coat, but depending on how light you're spraying or if the JB Weld is still showing, you may have to do a fifth and sixth coat, but usually it's around 4 coats. So on this coat, I'm a little bit heavier with it, especially around the areas that I had the markings before, and then we wait the 24 hours after that fourth coat, and then we make a decision on if we need more coats after 24 hours. So. There we go, and I'm gonna let that dry, and I can already tell I'm gonna probably need a 5th coat, maybe a 6th coat. Now, to prevent this, you could probably prime the lower with maybe a dark gray or something like that, and then apply 3 or 4 coats of this. But usually, I usually go with a dark color, so I usually never need to prime. This is my first time going with a light color like this flat forest green. So I could have probably primed it with a dark gray and then applied this, and I would have needed less coats for it to even out and not see the JB Weld there, but we'll get it right. You gotta remember, your spray painting guns and parts. This is fun. If you make a mistake, no big deal. You can easily correct it and end up with a beautiful product. I can already tell there's some imperfections on there that you guys can't see on camera, but when I take it to the bench top, I'll show you guys and we'll take care of those, and then it'll still end up great. So let me give it a little bit more. I've already done the other side before I start recording, so don't have to worry about that. All right, so we're gonna let that dry for about 24 hours and then we'll come back to it. All right, guys, so it's been like 12 hours and I can already tell that the JB Weld was a little too light for the green that I'm using. All the dark colors that I usually use are usually good enough to not have to prime. So I can already tell that I can still see that the imprints, not because of indentations or anything, but because again, the JB Weld was so white compared to the frame being black, and I did not prime. So decided to go ahead and throw in a primer. This is a flat gray primer, and I'm gonna prime the whole thing, and then we're gonna repaint and go from there. So I'm pretty sure that should take care of that. Now, if you're doing this and you're watching this video and you're doing a light color like this, prime first, you know, give it 1 coat of this primer, let it dry, and then do your 4 coats, and then you should be fine. Now the imperfections I see that you can't see on camera, we'll talk about those when we get the lower back on the bench, and then we'll go from there. So I'm gonna go ahead and prime this. So there we go. So I'm gonna prime, let that sit. I already did the back, So only have to do the front. We're gonna let that sit, let it dry. Not sure if we're only gonna do one coat or not, or two. We're gonna see how it looks after it dries, and then we'll go from there. All right, so primer's dry. I actually ended up dropping this thing, trying to move it for a better angle for y'all, but it's all right, doesn't matter. Use a microfiber towel, cleaned it up. We're ready to rock and roll. We're spray painting guns, it's no big deal. So, gonna go ahead, hit it again. Pretty generous with it. So we're gonna let that dry, and then I'm gonna do a second coat, and then we should be done. I already did the other side. So we're gonna do a second coat, take care of the inside parts right here real quick after it dries, and then that should be it. Usually guys, it should be, if you're gonna use a light color, prime it once, then go ahead and do your 4 coats. But you know, you live and you learn. So we're gonna let this dry for, I'm gonna wait 30 minutes, then I'm gonna come back, and then we're gonna do the last coat, and then we'll let it dry for 24 hours, and then we should be done. So here we are after painting. I ended up doing about 3 more coats on just the areas that we used JB Weld on after our final coat, so the last part that you saw. And I actually made a few mistakes doing this time around, and I'm glad I made them, so I can go over the mistakes that I made and how to fix them and how you can avoid them. Sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you don't. I'm glad I made some on camera so that you guys can see exactly what I mean. So mistake number 1 was not priming. So I assumed that because haven't primed in the past, because I usually use darker colors, that I didn't need to prime this time around. That was a mistake. Learn from that. Ended up having to do a few more coats. So if you're going to prime, when you use JB Weld, it's going to be that dark gray before you sand, but once you start sanding, it's going to turn white, and that white is going to take a little bit more coats for it to absorb and take on the color. So I don't know if it's the absorption of the paint. I don't know the science behind it, but it takes definitely more coats to fill it all in so you don't see it anymore. So mistake number 1 was not priming. So if you're doing a light color like this, even if you're not doing light color, I recommend priming. And for the priming, I use this flat gray primer, get it at Home Depot or wherever, and it works great. So you do 2 coats of this and you're good to go. Mistake number 2 was I did not heat up the lower long enough, so when I applied the JB Weld, there were pockets, air pockets in the application that developed. So after, when I sanded, those pockets were there. So remember I mentioned imperfections earlier. I wanted to bet that the paint would maybe take care of those imperfections. It didn't work out that way. That's why you see these little divots. So like one here, these little ones there. That's just from the solution, the whatever you want to call it, the JB Weld, it not melting into the crevices like we want it. So to not get this, make sure you heat up your lower long enough. I did it for like 2-3 minutes. Usually you want to do it, you know, 5 to 8 minutes. Get it nice and hot. If you have a heat gun, even better. I like to say blow dryer just because everybody has access to that, most people. So, but if you have a heat gun, that's even better. It heats it up even better. So heat up the area you're gonna apply it, so that when you're applying it, that it kind of melts into those crevices and there are no air pockets at all, and you don't have to deal with this. Now, to fix this, it's easy. You sand it down a little bit where there are the imperfections. You reapply JB Weld, let it dry, sand it smooth, and then you check it, repaint, you're good to go. So that's mistake number 2. Mistake number 3 was not letting the primer dry before applying the green color coat. So there's certain parts where you can tell, like there's these little cracks right there. That's from not letting the primer dry and then long enough and then applying the color right after, because then when the color dries, it does that. Not a big deal. I'm going to use a real fine sandpaper, sand those areas down. It's just a couple areas that did that. Sometimes when you're applying, you can apply more spray in one area depending on your hand dominance, how you're doing it, and you think that the whole thing dried evenly and it didn't, and then I reapplied, and that's what happened there. So sanding that down smooth, respray painting should be good to go. Mistake number 4 was dropping this thing. So I dropped it, so you see these little divots there. I'm gonna sand that as well and then repaint, and we should be good to go. So other than that, it came out pretty good. I like the color. Like I said, it's the first time I've done this light color, and I dig it. I want to do something with some greens and some FDEs, and yeah, you'll see more of this lower. Now, somebody may say, why not get it Cerakoted? You can. Some places you can get a Cerakote job for $60, $70 or whatever you get it, and you know, that's great. For me, I like the wear on rattle cans. I also like doing this stuff, so it's something for me to do that I enjoy, and I can change the color or do anything, you know, do whatever I want essentially. Now, as far as the legality of the serial numbers and all that, you're gonna have to look that up yourself. I'm not a lawyer. I just like to leave the serial numbers on mine, so that's really up to you. Some people excuse me, I'm still a little sick, but some people like that their grips are the same color as the lower. If you're gonna do that, don't put the grip on there and spray paint. Take the grip off or keep the grip off, hang the grip up, prep it, clean it, and spray it separately, and then put it on your lower. I find that the end product is a lot cleaner, a lot better, and you don't have little areas where the grip meets the lower that you can still see the black on the inside if you look closely. Now, most people are not going to see that, but you'll know it's there, and why not do it right the first time? So I recommend spray painting them separately and then putting it together. So and that's up to you. But other than that, like I said, oh, and one last tip before I let you guys go. If you've done your 4 or 5 coats and you can sort of see where the JB Weld was because the paint hasn't soaked up enough in that area, give it another, keep giving it more passes. You don't have to spray paint the whole lower. What I do is I leave it hanging. I'll spray it once or twice, bang, 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 let it dry, come back. Can I still see it? I flash a light on there. Can I see it? Is it still there? Do I need more? And then if I do, hit it again, bam, 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 let it dry. Not too much, just real simple, and then let it dry. If you have to give it 8 coats, that's fine. It's not going to add any weight. You'll be completely fine. As a matter of fact, you can weigh your lower before you do this, weigh it after. You're not going to notice any difference. So what I like to do again is just those areas that had the JB Weld, I don't redo the whole thing because you don't have to, and then just keep doing it like that. Sometimes it'll take 4 extra passes, sometimes it'll take 6, sometimes it'll take 5. Maybe with the primer and the color that you're using, it only takes 2. It really depends on what you're doing, the lower that you have, and what you can see with your eyes and what you deem perfection in your eyes. So for me, this is great. It looks good. I'll clean up the imperfections like I said, and I'll probably do a follow-up on it. But so far, how it turned out, it's been deleted. The emblem, stamp, engraving, all that gone. It's no longer there. And yeah, looks good. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comment section. I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. I appreciate you guys watching the video. Much love. I'll see you guys on the next one. Deuces.